Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I have got a special guest with me today. This is John DiGirolamo, author of It's Not About the Sex, True Stories of Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Officer, a Survivor, a Brothel Madam, and an Advocate. So, needless to say, there are a lot of perspectives in this book, John, but let's start with why you wanted to write this book.
Sure. So, to me, human trafficking is one of the most evil things that somebody can do to another person. And I wanted to kind of give survivors and others, such as advocates, a voice in this issue. And I really feel like it's not reported as much as it should be. It's kind of under the radar. And there's a lot of misperceptions out there that people see things in Hollywood or just certain headlines. So there's a lot of things that I think that the general public needed to know. And I looked at myself as sort of the average citizen. I knew a little bit, not a lot. And the more I got into it and started this project, the more I realized that a lot of those perceptions were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's what I love about this book is there are so many different perspectives. How did you, I guess, go about, because I'm sure this wasn't an overnight process. You had to go and, build these relationships and talk to these people and compile this information. So let's talk about the process of that.
Yeah, some of it was just through networks. I had talked to several nonprofits and told them what I was working on, and some people were very receptive, and others just were not, or if a survivor just wasn't ready to tell their story, something like that. So it really was just trying to build those relationships and get things moving that way. But when I started it, I really had no idea who the four people were going to be. I worked with all the people in the book to make sure that their story was told in an authentic manner. Yeah, I'm literally putting thoughts in their head and words in their mouth. And so they got a chance to review it and make sure that I captured what they wanted to say and that I had it accurately. So I felt like I worked closely with these folks to make sure that their story was told correctly.
Yes, and that was something I was going to mention. What I got is just so much authenticity from this. And I know, like you were saying, that took a lot of work. But the way you tell these stories, it really puts the reader in that situation as well and makes you connect with, these people because they are real people. So, I mean, is that what you want the readers to do overall?
Yeah, I really want the readers to see what the experience is like. I wanted to put together a way to show people what's going on in this country as it relates to this issue, but doing it in a way where it's an interesting read, where they want to turn the page and find out what happens next. And there's many ways you could do that. And one of the ways, for example, is in the Survivor chapter with Angela. She had a lot of diaries and journals that was part of her recovery process. And so I felt like that helped the reader know who this person was. In the Brothel Madam story of redemption, I did something I don't usually do, which is I did that first person point of view. And I wanted it to be as if you and her were sitting down in your living room having a conversation, and she's literally talking to you about what's going on. When I first heard about her story, I couldn't believe all the all the pieces of that story, because the first question I was asking is, okay, how do you become an escort girl and then decide, yeah, it's a great idea, let's go to LA to do pornography, and oh, let's go to Denver and do a brothel. And I heard that and I said, okay, wait a minute, how does somebody come to those conclusions? And we spent a lot of time kind of going back in time to look at that decision process.
For you personally, I mean, this couldn't have been an easy book to write. So, how did this impact you on a personal level?
Yeah, it's a very serious subject, and it's something where I tried to focus on being authentic with each of the person I was profiling. But for me, it was very serious, and it was kind of hard to relive some of that stuff because you could kind of feel their emotions, their trauma. Um, and the more I learned about it, kind of the worse it got in a sense of kind of how this happens and how this happens, especially to underage teens when you have your whole life ahead of you and you've gone through this traumatic experience. So I did try to focus on some of the success stories, and not every story ended with roses and rainbows and puppy dogs. Um, so I wanted to give kind of a balanced view, but for me, I just had to stay focused on what I was doing, and it kind of gave me a broad perspective. If I was having a bad day, it was like, well, it's minuscule compared to what these people have gone through.
Yeah, exactly. I think anyone who reads that will have that that
Right.
mentality after reading this for sure. So, another thing that was just very interesting to me was just how you explained. I mean, there's so many different scenarios. Like you said, some of the myths, misconceptions, people think maybe, they're locked in a basement with chains and,
Right.
bars on the windows. But I feel like you did a very, very good job of showing that it's not always that, it's in plain sight, like one of your, chapter states. So what would you, I guess, tell people who still kind of have that myth or misconception in their head?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of top misconceptions. One of them is the kidnapping um, version. Every person I talked to about this book that I interviewed hated the movie Taken because they just felt like it just really gave the public a misperception. That's about 3 to 5%. So it's not the person being snatched off the street on a street corner and thrown into a van. That's really very, very small. The other piece is that boys make up 40 to 45% of the victims being exploited. I think people are surprised there. And the other piece is where I focused, which was small town America, suburban America. We absolutely have problems with trafficking on the border, and certainly in big cities. There's just more crime in general. But when I would talk to people just as I was writing this book, I would tell them what I was doing, and I'd hear a lot, oh, we live in a nice neighborhood, it doesn't happen here, and kind of comments like that, or oh, it doesn't happen in these small towns. And that's when I kind of knew I was in the right direction because that's where all these stories take place. And Colorado, I think, it has a good representation of the country. So that's I think another major piece is that it does happen in all states, all towns, places where you don't expect it to happen. And what I was trying to do is get some of those bullet points, if you will, and turn them into plot lines.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, and something I love about the book is, at the very end, what people can do. How can they take action? How can they get involved? So, was that a key piece that you really wanted to include in your book?
I didn't really think of that until the end, until I was talking to my wife, and she was saying something to the effect of, well, people are going to read this book and now they're going to say, now what? And so we talked about, okay, well, maybe we should have a what you can do section that gives you some facts, gives you some tips, and then gives you some resources. And so that's I've been doing presentations to various groups over the last several months, and that's an area that I get a lot of questions on, especially from parents. Hey, what are those grooming signs? How do they do this online? Subsequently, I landed up interviewing a undercover police officer that poses as a 13-year-old girl, and he arrests people at the motel. And I go through some of those stories, and the audience is like, wow, we had no idea what was going on. And one of the plot lines was a girl who was groomed through an online gaming situation, and that happens all the time. And it's not just through games; it's through other popular social media, TikTok, Snapchat, etc.
I think a lot of people would be shocked to find out how, really how easy it is for people to contact people.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a different world than the previous generation. If you think about the average 15-year-old, they were born in 2007. So to an old guy like me, that doesn't sound very long ago, but they've lived in a world where Facebook has always existed, smartphones, PayPal, they're attached to their phone many times as a teenager. And they look at having thousands of friends or followers as a goal instead of a problem. And you wouldn't let your kid wander the mall and talk to 20 different strangers. So why would you let them go on the internet and talk to 20 different strangers?
That's a great point. Great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure all the parents out there are like, oh, let's reconsider. But yeah, we got to talk about, where to get your book. And you mentioned speaking. Can people book you for that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done multiple states besides Colorado. So I have a website, www.itisnotabout.com. You can get a signed copy from me from that website. There's a contact information. So I've spoken with Rotary groups, church groups, parent teacher type of groups, and then can tailor the whole talk to depending upon that audience. And then of course the book is on Amazon, and you can get a Kindle version and an audio version, which actually I think turned out really nice.
That's awesome. Well, and we gotta mention that this is not your first book.
Right.
Yeah, you want to tell us about the others?
Yeah. So my first book came out a little over a year ago, called "It's Not About the Badge," and I focused on the human side of policing. And I would ask an officer, tell me about a day on the job you'll never forget. And I focused on these small town middle America officers. And, initially I kind of expected I'd get similar answers, but it turned out I got very different answers. And, if you looked at the police report, it would look rather routine and boring. And what I focused on is, well, why was it important to you as an officer? Why did this make an impact to you? And that really kind of tied into the new book, because when I was interviewing one of the officers, I would have all kinds of questions. And at the end, I would just have these, kind of off the wall. What's your favorite song? What's your favorite movie? What'd you do if you won the lottery? And one of the guys just stopped and said, I'd quit my job and hunt down human traffickers.
Mm.
And when I heard that, I said, that's my next book. And that's, I realized I know a little, but very, very little. And I'm betting that most people are like me, don't really understand the issue that much. And then that kind of, projected me into into the book that just came out.
Well, that is bad. We already can't wait for the next book to come out. John, thank you so much for talking to us today. Do you have any final thoughts or messages that you want to share?
So you definitely want to be aware of what your teen is doing online. You should be controlling the passwords. There are programs out there like Bark and Canopy that can help parents monitor, but they have to be on top of it. You can't just do it once and forget about it, um, because your kid might not be looking for trouble, but trouble is definitely looking for them.
Mm, great message. John, thanks again so much for joining us.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really glad we had the conversation.
Me too. Me too.